is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Well, welcome into another episode of Fremont. I am John Kurtz, joined as always by Derek Young and Cole Manbeck as we break down a nice little casual 29-point win for K-State over Troy, a team that have won 12 straight games as the Wildcats double up the spread. Cover with ease in the end, but it was not an easy game per se for K-State. They got pushed a little bit here, and we're going to talk about that and start to get ready for Mizzou. A big one coming up this week in Columbia. And if you are headed there, like I know Cole and I are, of course Derek will be there, but Cole and I will be there toughing it out as fans and in that stadium, my first trip to Faurot Field since 2004. It would be smart to bring some 360 vodka or some Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon with you from our friends at Holiday Distillery. Make sure you've got that ready to go so that you can tailgate your you-know-what off. Another early one, so, you know, whether it's Bloody Marys or whatever it might be. If you're just going to go straight shots of Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon, that's okay too. Whatever your strategy is to get liquored up and ready to go for the game, make sure that you do it with our friends at Holiday Distillery, who are great K-State folks who support the pod, so please support them. To me, the takeaway from this game, there are a lot of things, and I have concerns, and I would just set the table by saying, like, when we get to some of those concerns, it's going to be fairly nitpicky here because, again, regardless of what Derek said about Troy, this is still a team with a pulse and a solid team that have won 12 straight games. And I saw some of the fan reaction from Troy fans on Twitter after the game. I was like, man, we haven't gotten thumped like that in a long time. So that's that. It's good to be sitting here and like nitpicking some things and worried about some things coming out of a game like that. But I think to me, the big takeaway is like, hey, this turned out to be a pretty opportune test for K-State to have right here. Not just being pushed down or only up 14-10 late in the first half, having to get that Phillip Brooks touchdown right before the half, which was huge, but being pushed in a way that will be similar to what they're about to see next week with Mizzou, which is going to be like a pretty salty front seven. Troy had a pretty good defensive line that provided K-State some real problems there, and they had to get a little creative to get around that and figure things out offensively. And at the end of the day, you sit here saying, man, they've scored almost 90 points through the first 2 weeks. The defense still appears ahead of schedule, and with some things to work on going into Mizzou, I think you got to feel overall pretty good about where things sit right now.
Yeah, I would say the defense is ahead of schedule. There's parts of the offense that are, where you thought might be a little further along at this point, but at the end of the day, you played an FCS team that'll probably be in the FCS playoffs. You played a group of 5 team that should cruise to a bowl game, and you won those 2 contests by a combined score of 87-13. So all in all, I think there's something to be happy about. And like you said, and Chris Klieman iterated it after the game, I think he told his team this. We heard it from the players. Like, it was good for them to get punched in the mouth at least once before the Missouri game. And obviously that happened in the second quarter against Troy. So to be able to take a punch before a game comes where you're expected to take multiple punches and then get off the mat and still cruise to a 29-point win, I think that says a lot about where this team is at right now. And in general, it probably says a lot about where this team is at, where they've beaten 2 teams of this caliber. Yeah, they're not, Texas Tech or anything of that nature, but these are 2 teams where in the past, if you get punched in the mouth, maybe it becomes a little bit of a dogfight, right? I think we've seen that before. So I take solace in the fact that they took a punch. They played 2 solid teams, I would say, and cruised with relative ease, even though it probably never looked as pretty as some of the games did at the latter half of last season.
14.5-point favorites, you double the number on the spread and win the game by 29. And, the defense once again flashed and showed a lot of things that I don't think we expected right out of the gate to start the season. That's my biggest takeaway from the game, is just how good I feel about this defense moving forward and how many dudes they have, especially in the secondary and on that defensive line, and then Austin Moore at linebacker. So, yeah, you beat the defending Sun Belt champs, a team picked to win the Sun Belt Conference in the preseason poll, team receiving votes in the top 25 poll, and a top 10 defense last year that's probably going to be a top 25, top 30 defense this season. You win the game handily. So there's a lot of reasons to feel good about that, because you feel like you might have played offensively a maybe B-, C+ type of game, especially up front on the offensive line. And I think we all have a lot of trust that they'll get that corrected the thing that John, you and I said on the Patreon post-game show when we went live is, on the offensive line front, we'll dive more into that in a few minutes, is they've done it with these guys before. They've had success with them, albeit they're missing Christian Duffy right now, but they should get him back potentially this weekend against Missouri. So the fact that they've done it with this group of guys, they're going to get this thing corrected and they're going to play better. And I think they're going to be just fine on the offensive side of the football, especially as they get Keegan Johnson more mixed into the offense. It's going to be a hard offense to defend.
Wait, did I just hear you downgrade from? I thought we were like B plus after the game. Did you downgrade them to a C plus, B minus?
That was on the offense. I thought we did a B plus for the overall team performance because I'm giving the defense a solid A for their performance in that game. But the offense, I would say, was more of a B minus type of performance. Maybe DY disagrees.
I know. Well, I'm just saying I appreciate this Professor Manbeck segment that we're all sudden constituting here. So I hope that continues moving forward. You get your pen in your hand as well. I mean, I think I had you in class. Geez, it'd be over a decade ago now. Now I feel.
I've got my pen and paper right here, DY.
You're giving me PTSD. No, I would say defense A. Maybe A plus if they didn't give up their one rushing explosive, right? So there was one missed run fit probably in 2 weeks. So defense A, offense in general, probably B-ish and a little bit lower for the offensive line if we want to target that position specifically. And I know we will. An exercise that I'm not really always comfortable doing is kind of running down one player. But all I will say is, and I think Cole alluded to it a little bit earlier, is that I think this starts to look a little bit better when you get a little bit more healthy at offensive tackle.
Yeah, it'll make a huge difference. It'll make a huge difference for sure. I mean, look, the defense is just, they've been outstanding. They're 38 yards per game rushing that they've allowed through 2 games is best in the country. I mean, that's pretty good. And my concern was about the defensive line, and they've also been racking up some sacks. I saw Khalid Duke is like top 10 in the country right now in sacks. Again, early through 2 weeks. But I like a lot of what I'm seeing right there. And I remember at the halftime, I was kind of like, I feel decent about this. It's like Troy had a receiver make 2 just insane one-handed grabs. And that basically led to all 10 of the points. I mean, one of those was a third down where the ball is just airmailed. And K-State did a good job of getting pressure on the quarterback. And he makes an Odell Beckham style one-handed grab to extend that drive that I believe turned into a field goal. And then, of course, the touchdown grab. There were pretty good coverage there and just a one-handed catch in the end zone. I think now looking back on it at the end of the game, I was kind of waffling at halftime. I'll be like, okay, is that the story or are there real struggles here and growing pains? I think it was like Troy made a couple insane plays and that led to their points. And outside of that, K-State just completely shut them down. Like the corners, not just the defensive line, man. Jacob Parrish was insane, like knocking down everything that was coming his way. Will Lee not only was doing pretty well in coverage, but we really saw the physicality that he brings in the run game. He was doing a great job crashing in and wreaking havoc in the backfield there, taking dudes down. Like you got to like a lot of what you see on defense. They really pop like they've got some dudes on that side of the ball right now.
Yeah, I thought Troy kind of made their plays right there. Probably at an opportune time for them because that was right around some mistakes by Kansas State where they let a few passes get into some of the pockets there with a soft zone. Then they make 2 really good catches. It's coming on the heels of a Will Howard interception that he probably shouldn't have thrown so they get the points off turnovers. So that was just a sequence where Kansas State made their mistakes and Troy capitalized off of it like a good team and a well-coached team does. And at the end, Kansas State, which is a little bit, I guess, a departure from what we've seen from a Chris Klieman coach Kansas State team. They really, put the foot on the pedal at the end of the first half when it could have been easy for them to kind of go into the locker room and just want to regroup. Instead, they push the ball downfield and you get 3 older players just making a play that kind of puts Troy away for good, makes everyone rest easy on the touchdown pass to Phillip Brooks. Good throw from Will Howard, put it on him, hit him in stride. Phillip Brooks, great, good catch, does the damage after he hauls it in. And then Jaden Jackson probably makes the most pivotal block that we've seen so far this season. So you had Kansas State a little bit on the ropes there at the end of the first half. Chris Klieman trusts his team, and you had 3 older players step up and make a play.
I don't think we could understate how big that touchdown was to Brooks right before the half because it feels a little Tulane-ish, DY, if you're going in up 14-10 with them getting the ball to start the second half, right? I mean, the anxiety in the stadium wouldn't have been great. So getting up by 11, then getting that 3 and out right away to start the second half, and eventually the defense just kept shutting them down. On the first 4 drives of the second half, Troy had 4 consecutive 3 and outs that put K-State's offense in very advantageous field position. We'll dive into that more in a little bit. The offense didn't really capitalize on a lot of that, but yeah, I think Troy had 12 plays for 27 yards of offense in those first 4 series of the second half. They dominated them. It might have even been less than that. So shout out to the K-State defense. Jacob Parrish was K-State's number 1 graded defender overall by Pro Football Focus, and Will Lee was K-State's second best defender according to PFF as well. So those guys were great. And I thought it was interesting. Will Lee was the number 1 graded run defender for K-State, which makes sense. I mean, how many times we see him in the backfield making plays? He's starting to show, and we can dive into this later too, but he's starting to show guys some of that physicality that Julius Brents had, and coming up and run support too.
Yeah, I would say Will Lee, Jacob Parrish, Austin Moore, Desmond Purnell, and then basically every defensive end really stood out to me in that game.
Yeah, the defensive end group is very encouraging right now. Malak had a sack, right? He got the strip sack at the end of the first half, and then even Toby got his moment there at the end of the game too.
Yeah, I don't know if Brendan Mott I don't know if you can look at the stat sheet and tell what he did. He was the defensive end of the game in week 1, but in week 2, I also thought that the splashes might have been from Khalid Duke and Nate Matlack, but Brendan Mott might have been the most consistently disruptive of the 3.
According to Pro Football Focus, DY, he had the number 2 pass rush grade on the team behind Will Lee, and Khalid Duke was number 3. So that shows you, I mean, how many times you look at the QB hurries, I mean, Mott had to have like 3 or 4 where he might have been responsible for Gunnar Watson not being the same at quarterback for Troy in the second half because he drilled him a few times.
Yeah.
That was it. He took a lot of hits. Like I think that there was a part of that too, where and that's what should happen in a game like that, right? As the K-State kind of wears down the opponent because you have more depth of talent, and eventually, all the shots that K-State was getting on the QB seemed to really affect things with their offense in the second half to the point that they wound up benching him eventually.
Yeah, and they kind of, I wouldn't say unleashed a new package. It's probably something that they just decided to go with in that game, or they have been working on, but it's intriguing because what else can they do with it, right? When you put Khalid Duke and Toby Osunzami together side by side on the same side of the line of scrimmage, I think you got to pick your poison a little bit there if you're an offensive line.
Well, I want to touch real quick a little bit more on what you guys were saying about Chris Klieman at the end of the first half, because I did find it interesting. Like, he got asked about deciding to basically put the pedal to the floor there at the end of the first half and try to go. I thought, based on what we know about Klieman, and I can remember especially like 2019, a couple times being very frustrated with him being really conservative in situations like that. That was encouraging for me to see for just the development of him as a head coach, to like realize the importance of that situation and combine that with the trust that he has now in Will Howard running the offense and Colin Klein calling the offense. Like, it just totally different attitude than where this was with and it's nothing against Skylar Thompson, but like 2019 Skylar Thompson, Courtney Messingham, like those type of situations, they just were not aggressive like that. And he basically said in a press conference, like, hey, I realized like we don't have any momentum. We need to find a way to create some momentum before the end of the half. And I'm sure in the back of your mind, you're thinking like field goal probably, but it turns into a touchdown because you were willing to put your trust into Will Howard throwing the ball down the field, even after a first half where he threw a pretty bad interception in the end zone into double coverage. So I was encouraged by that sort of evolution that we saw there from Klieman, just even being willing to do that. And the offense paid it off, which makes me think like they'll be willing to do that in more situations down the road, which I think will be really important.
Yeah, for me, it's 3 things. One is trust in your offense coordinator, trust in your quarterback, your offensive line. You have an older team. I think that helps. Number 2, I think it's just it's continued evolution as a head coach, understanding that this is kind of where the game is going. If you kind of look into the analytics and how things work out, it's probably more worth it to do this. And he's been willing to kind of, decipher and analyze those situations and, change or adjust his approach based off of them. So he is looking into the data more and more as a head coach the longer he stays at Kansas State. And obviously that's a reassuring thing. And 3, it probably just, a bit of a philosophy change that kind of ties into number 2, but they felt like when they self-assessed themselves last year, even during a Big 12 championship run, that they were weaker than they need to be in the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. And that was something we heard from Chris Klieman after the game. We literally heard that, I think, from all 7 players that we talked to after the game as well. So you hear it from Chris Klieman. It was, harped all along. It sounds like throughout the offseason, even in training sessions with strength coach Truman Harrell, who kind of pounded it into their heads as well. So this is a philosophy and an emphasis this year to, they call it 4 over 4, but those final 4 minutes of the first half and first 4 minutes of the second half are critical and important to this team that they want to emphasize week in and week out.
I do want to note, I think he's really evolved since the 2021 season and on. Those first couple of years, he was more conservative. But you remember 2021, that game against OU in Manhattan, he went for like 4 or 5 different fourth downs. There was the West Virginia game in Manhattan. He went for a 4th and like 5 and hit Sammy Wheeler for a seam route on a dime from Skylar Thompson. He has been more willing to go for it. But to that point, John, what was really impressive about it is Will Howard got sacked on the first play of that drive to put him in a 2nd and 18 with less than a minute left. And he called a timeout. Like, how many coaches in college football just say, all right, well, we're in 2nd and long now, we're just going to run the clock out. But the fact that he called a timeout and still had the trust they would get a first down eventually and then get down and score says a lot. I think the coach they're going up against this week, and Eli Drinkowitz, might be the most conservative coach in college football. He hasn't went for a 4th down yet.
Yeah, which doesn't make a lot of sense because he aggressively runs his mouth, right? He postures himself as this uber aggressive, like modern kind of coach. And then, I was shot. Bill Conley, who's a Missouri grad, by the way, tweeted out yesterday, all these situations like 4th and 1, 4th and 2s near midfield are in a plus territory where they haven't gone for it yet this year, which probably tells you what they think about their quarterback and their offense is a piece of that too. But anyway, sorry, Eli.
No, I was just saying, and when Klieman calls that timeout when it's 2nd and long, he's, re-harping on that message to his locker room too. They see that, and it's like, okay, this 4 over 4 thing is real. We're doing it this year.
Yeah, crucial moment. Great development to see there from Klieman, and love every bit of that. There was another major positive that occurred in the second half that I do want to touch on here in just a moment. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that I'm rocking some home field here. I've got the K-State baseball tee going on here, which I like a lot. Tons of versatility. Homefieldapparel.com is where you can find this. They have a slew of K-State gear there with all sorts of different logos, all the old school retro logos, which is what is in right now that everybody is wearing. So get to homefieldapparel.com and check it out. They've got a huge selection with a couple of K-State drops here in the last 3 months. And you can search over 100 other teams if you would like to do a little searching around, find some other cool stuff. There are tons of awesome shirts there. And we've got the promo code for you, 3MON23, if you want 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. It's a great place. Go get your gear. That's what I was rocking at the game on Saturday. That's what I'm pretty much typically rocking when I'm going to a K-State game. So get stocked up. Look like us. What better endorsement could I give you than that? Just look like us. You could be wearing the same thing that we are, and you know how dashingly handsome we are if you watch this on YouTube. So homefieldapparel.com. DY, I saw that reaction, and I am offended, frankly. We'll take a break, come back with another positive next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So I know one thing that was a little curious, just the timing of it, but you go through the first half, the offense is struggling a little bit, and I'm sitting there talking to Cole, I'm like, man, Cole and I's conversation was kind of like, this is a bummer. It looks like Keegan Johnson isn't going to be able to play again. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, second half, he's out there, and he made an impact. I mean, limited, and definitely seemed like a pitch count sort of a situation there, but he winds up with 3 catches for 25 yards, almost had a touchdown, and looked very explosive and showcased some great hands. It was even that catch that he almost scored on. It was just the explosiveness out of catching the ball and turning and spinning really fast to get upfield. It looked different. He's got a different level of explosiveness to him than I think what they have in the rest of the receiver core. So positive that he got out there on the field. The explanation after the game was, that they were thinking of working him in late in the first half, but they didn't want him to get going and then have to cool down and then come back out again because he has this soft tissue injury going on. So I guess like I can understand that. All in all, I'm just happy that he got out there, knocked a little bit of the rust off before he goes to Mizzou, because I think he's just going to be such a key component of this offense and definitely, to me, flash the potential that he has.
Yeah, you kind of hit on all the elements that I would add. Like, this receiver room, I think, is solid without him, but they are a different room with him because he provides an element of an explosiveness and vertical threat that probably otherwise isn't there. Although Jaden Jackson's proving that he can go over the top a little bit. Yep. So that's a nice development in the last 2 weeks if he can sustain that through the course of 12, 13, 14 games this year. And that would be, a big boost to that room in case, something were to happen with Keegan Johnson, who has shown to be a little injury prone so far in his career. But, Kansas State's a lot better with Keegan Johnson without him. I think we all knew that, but we got to see it for ourselves on Saturday against Troy, and it was pretty apparent just at his 3 touches. I also would say, I think they were trying to throttle him, pitch count, so to speak, and it got to a point in the second quarter where it was like, okay, now it's time, just like when they did with Uso Sayamala the week before. Okay, now it's time. But considering Keegan Johnson's injury, I thought they probably made the right decision there you don't want to get a guy up, then get a guy down, and get him up again. I thought they wanted to be really careful with it. So that it is probably a smart thing to do. You want him on the field against Missouri. He got his feet wet. This was best case scenario. He got in the second half, did his thing. So I liked it. You got to remember, Keegan Johnson saw 17 snaps. That was more than what Uso got the week before. So I'm pretty reassured at this point.
I think one of the most reassuring things was just watching how explosive he was in and out of breaks, DY. He flashed the speed. It didn't look like the leg tightness that he had been battling had any sort of impact on him. And one thing to note is that 17-yard completion he nearly scored on, which was the second pass he caught in the game. That was against Reddy Stewart, who is arguably the best group of 5 corner in the country. He graded as the number 8 corner in the country, according to Pro Football Focus last season. He's the one that had the interception that Will Howard made the mistake on. He had a pick 6 the prior week against Stephen F. Austin. He's a heck of a corner, and Keegan made it look easy against him in and out of that break. And he just changes the dynamics of how you defend K-State. We saw what they were doing, Troy was, with Ben Sinnott early on in that game, and Ben Sinnott ends up with 5 yards on maybe 2 or 3 targets in the game. They were bracketing him, doubling him a lot of the time. They were able to load up to stop the run, because without Keegan, you don't have that vertical explosive threat as much. Now, Jaden Jackson, to your point, he grades out as K-State's highest receiver according to PFF in the game, 4 catches, 77 yards. I think you could argue maybe the one benefit of Keegan not coming out of the gate and playing a ton of snaps is they might have found another guy at receiver. And Jaden Jackson, what we thought was maybe a 3-horse wide receiver room and RJ Garcia, Phillip Brooks, and Keegan, they've got a 4th body that they maybe didn't have last season. Last year was Cade Warner, Malik Knowles, and Phillip Brooks. They might have found that 4th guy with Jaden here, because he has stepped up back-to-back weeks, 2 touchdown grabs, and that vertical pass on the seam route showed some really nice hands. So that's certainly something to be encouraged. We know the pedigree's there, recruiting pedigree. Jaden Jackson was a high-profile recruit that went to Ole Miss, didn't pan out, transferred here, and maybe things are clicking now. And that just opens up things even more for this offense. So, but you circle back to Keegan, it's just, there was a route that he ran. I specifically watched him because they didn't have safety help over the top. So I was looking at him to see if they went vertical to him. And it was actually the 40-yard pass they went to Jaden Jackson on down the middle. But I watched Keegan from the start, and he burnt his guy from the snap and would have been open too across the middle. So just a lot of things to be encouraged about what we saw there in the second half.
And we're not even talking about Phillip Brooks, who really carried the offense, had the huge play, obviously, before halftime. But in the first half, it seemed like they were really going to him a lot. And I think a couple things were happening. And Derek, I'll be curious your opinion on this because of how well you see the game. But one, and I heard Will Howard talk about this after the game. He said you could hear, every time they got up to the line of scrimmage, they were always look at Sinnott. They were always pointing out Ben Sinnott. Watch this guy. Don't let him get open. They really concerted effort to keep him from hurting them. So it was taking him away. Other guys were going to have to step up. They also have this great defensive line that was shutting down the run game. So K-State almost by necessity had to go to a lot of shorter stuff to Phillip Brooks to kind of supplement the run game for a while there. And Brooks did a really nice job. It kind of, I feel like he is what he is at this point. He is somebody that can really help you and be steady in scenarios like that. And when they had to have it, they got it from him, particularly in the first half there.
And you nailed it. And another thing that would have helped to alleviate some of the things that Troy was doing, right? Troy's, attacking Ben Sinnott and not letting him have his way the way that he did the week before and throughout the second half of last season. And they were able to stay up and take away that run game. The best way to really mitigate some of that, what they are doing, is to throw over the top a little bit more. And now they did it a couple times, and a couple times it really, really worked, especially to Jaden Jackson, of course. And maybe it would have been something that they could have gone to the well a little bit more. Keegan Johnson's 100% and playing start to finish as well. But and we'll go to this, and maybe this is a good time to get into it. But it's also tough to have a vertical game when you're not protecting Will Howard long enough. Like, to be able to go over the top, you have to protect for a little bit longer. And that's one of the issues as well in terms of how they were going to mitigate Troy playing up so much on the run and taking away Ben Sinnott, because one of the solutions is to really get a vertical passing game going. That's a little bit tougher when you're not protecting your quarterback as well.
Well, some of that, yes, comes with, one, obviously having Keegan Johnson in the game, which he wasn't playing in the first half. That helps. Adding an element to your vertical passing game, and yes, then the offensive line situation. So this is the time. What's that?
And maybe a willingness to do so as well. If you don't have to go to it, maybe you don't want to show it as much the week before Missouri. So a good player.
Perhaps that was actually, we got that question after the game in our Patreon live chat, which if you want to get live instant reaction, Cole and I have already done an hour on the game taking live questions. You can find that at patreon.com/3ma. $5 a month to sign up for that. We've got all sorts of bonus content. Typically, it's been like 2 to 3 extra episodes throughout the week. We're doing the live chat after the game. You can get some of Cole's stat breakdowns, a little bit of inside info. Cole doing a little bit of writing, picking that pen back up, the aforementioned pen, picking it back up. So patreon.com/3ma if you want to be a part of that. But we did get a question, DY, like someone was like, hey, are they being a little vanilla on offense on purpose? And I think that my initial reaction was like, I feel like some of that is we're stuck back in like the Bill Snyder mode of thinking, where like Snyder was definitely famous for doing that. A part of that being that he was always playing pretty easy non-con schedules. I don't know. They had Trayshawn Ward throwing the ball to Will Howard against SEMO. So like, Colin Klein doesn't seem to be as much in that same vein, but maybe there is something to that. What's your take?
Not like all across the board. I don't know. I don't think it's like a philosophy in general that dictates the calls that they are making, the play calls. But I would say maybe the concepts within the play. Maybe they're not having those be as complex as they could, such as if, maybe your blocking principles and concepts are a little bit more basic than otherwise they would be with a game on the line or a really competitive game with an opponent that you feel like can challenge you from start to finish. Your route combinations, maybe you're hiding your best stuff and still just doing a basic route tree. So the play call at large, I don't think they're holding back, but maybe the little things within those play calls, I think perhaps are a bit more basic, at least in these first 2 games.
On our Patreon Discord channel, DY, after the game, Tate, he had an observation that, and I don't want to quote Tate on this, but he thought maybe our offensive line blocking principles, the way that we were scheming it up, was maybe a little bit more conservative and vanilla, and the way that they went about it. Did you get any sort of sense of that? That seems hard to figure out with offensive linemen and the creativity you can do up front, but we know this is a unique system Connor Riley runs. It's a quality system. So what were your thoughts on what they were doing up front from that?
They definitely can be more creative, but it's kind of what I said in the first thing, like the schemes and concepts within the play call, I think can be basic at times, but you really, and I'm not going to pretend to be it, I think you really have to be an offensive line expert to kind of maybe detect that. And that's why I have KSU_fan on our site doing all that stuff. But, and I'm sure he'll be able to explain it even more maybe later in the week when he does a lot of his gifts that he puts on the site and kind of, analyzes play by play in terms of what worked and what didn't. It's more of a, what I'd say, educated speculation on my front, that on my part, that they are not holding back in terms of play calls, like Kurtz said. I mean, Trayshawn Ward threw a touchdown pass to Will Howard already this season. I think it's more of like you're keeping stuff within those play calls a bit more basic so far.
And they got to a point where, speaking of play calls, they busted out like the Will Howard kind of loop around run, which we used to see Cullen Klein do a lot. And it's a very like rudimentary explanation of the play. But they had a couple like well-placed, including on that drive before halftime, like, hey, let's just run Will. Like, because we're struggling running the ball conventionally. We need to kind of do this to jumpstart things right now. And it worked well. I mean, the only thing I didn't like was, I think it was the 28-13 drive. He took a huge shot down by the goal line, which I didn't really love. That was totally necessary, but
I think that was more on Will for kind of going for those extra couple yards. So that's a decision I think that your quarterback makes. But I mean, you're right. I mean, they probably are a little basic right now, but they're still figuring it out as well. And the QB run game, I hope, is not a staple every week, but it was certainly something that they felt like they had to kind of commit to a little bit in that third quarter, and ultimately it helped. But I'm curious to how things shake out. Who's at right tackle going forward, right? Because I wonder, are they getting healthy enough to go a different way there? Because that can help, obviously. Here's the thing. You kick out Cooper Beebe to right tackle. Great solution. He's an All-American. He can play well just about anywhere you put him on the offensive line. But you know what happens when you kick out Cooper Beebe to right tackle? You don't have him at left guard. Then you don't run the ball as well. So that's another tool that you're without in the running game when Cooper Beebe has to play right tackle.
Yeah, and I mean, that clearly, like, look, right tackle was a problem. I mean, we can't, there's no other way to say it on Saturday. Like, right tackle was a huge problem. It completely killed one drive in particular. I believe it was one of those third quarter drives when they got the ball inside the 45, 3 straight drives, and finally punched it in. One of those, I mean, 2 plays out of the 3 that they ran. I mean, it just blew the thing up. Like, you can't survive like that, especially against what's going to be a good front 7 and front 4 for Mizzou coming up. Christian Duffy has been hurt, though. That obviously hurts. John Pastore, is it Pastore or Pastore? I always forget. Pastore. John Pastore has been hurt as well, and it seems like they're both starting to get back now. And I think that will definitely help. That will allow you to keep Cooper Beebe inside if you can get one of those guys playing solid on the right side of tackle. But, I mean, it is a concern to me. And I know I heard Will Howard say after the game that was one of the best defenses that he's played in his time at K-State. He gave a lot of credit to Troy. I understand. I know that they have a really good defensive line. They've got athletes because of, being located like in the South, you generally are going to be able to find more really good athletes up front like that. But the run game, until that final drive, it was nice to see that last scoring drive that they had where they really just muscled their way down the field, and they finally did seem to get things going a little bit in the run game. It was pretty bad there for a while. Like, they just could not run the ball at all, and then combined with some protection issues, it's just, there's enough going on there that I'm thinking, like, man, this is a concern. Like, it's enough for me to be labeled a legitimate concern, and I understand that health plays a factor in that right now. But they've got to get something figured out. It's been a little bit of a slow start, I would say, for a group. And a part of this is we're not only grading on a conference championship scale, we're also grading on that was heralded as one of the strengths of the team in the offseason scale, right? So that's why we're going to be nitpicky about this right now.
Yeah, and I would say, there's a reason why Cullen Klein got a little bit screen. He's went to the screen game, a few times each game, I think, to kind of slow down the pass rush even. So that's part of it. And when Will Howard says, that's one of the best defenses I've ever faced, I'm not sure he necessarily means that from an athleticism or a personnel standpoint, although they're probably at the top of the group of 5, at least on that side of the ball and with their front 4. But I think maybe from a schematic in disguise standpoint, I think Troy does have an increased, difficulty level to kind of go up against as well.
To level set on that, guys, I mean, there was a Troy defense last year that was 24th in the country, allowing 3.6 yards per carry. They held 7 of their opponents in 2022 to under 3 yards per carry in those games, and they held 9 of their opponents to under 4 yards per carry in 2022. K-State averaged 3.9 in the game. But to your point, John, I mean, here's a number that kind of blew me away, but it makes sense the way we watched the game. Trayshawn Ward's first 10 carries of the game, he had that 20-yard run, I think his second carry. On his other 9 out of his first 10, he rushed for 8 yards. On DJ Giddens' first 4 runs of the game, he had 27 yards on the ground. On his next 6 carries, he had 7 yards on the ground. Giddens and Ward had 12 rushes that went for 2 yards or less combined, including 7 that went for no gain or negative yardage. And DY, this is from your expert analysis, which go check out KSO for some of this stuff. I mean, it's outstanding information in addition to all the other great information Drew, Jimmy, and DY put out there in Mason. But K-State had a 38% success rate on the ground in the second half, contrary to a 60% success rate in the first half, averaged 2.7 yards per rush in the game's final 30 minutes. So it was a struggle to get things going in the ground game. And that last drive, they had a 70% success rate, according to DY and the expert analysis on 10 rushes. So they were able to maybe wear Troy's defense down a little bit at that point. But, man, there was a stretch where they could just not get anything going on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's enough. I'm officially, to me, it's just flagged as a concern right now. That doesn't mean I'm panicking. I think they'll be able to figure it out. I think another thing to keep in mind is it feels like they start slow with the offensive line. That's been kind of a hallmark, and they do a really good job of figuring it out as the year goes along. And I do like a lot of the depth that they have right now, but that's on paper, right? Like on paper coming into the season, we felt really good about the depth that they have. I'm very optimistic about where it will go long term. Connor Riley, I have a lot of faith in, and I think he's done an excellent job with figuring these things out as the year develops. And they have been playing a lot of bodies too, trying to just find answers. Like I think they found some answers at right tackle. May not have been the answer that you really wanted in the first 2 weeks, but you got an answer there. So that is a piece of it too. I'll just DY, if you have one final thought here on the offensive line, that's my piece. Speaking my piece on the offensive line right now.
I will say they whether it's with different personnel or a kick in the butt to where they play a little bit better, they have to be better against Missouri because Missouri does provide basically the similar issues and challenges when it comes to a pass rush. And to me, Missouri is one of the best corners in all of the country too, at Chris Abrams straight.
Well, speaking of Mizzou, we will get to the Tigers here in just a moment. They mowed down Middle Tennessee 23 to 19 on Saturday. It was a great performance out of the Tigers. But before we get to that, we got to talk about our friends at DraftKings. Football is back in full swing with another week of epic games. And who's got you covered on the action for every single one of them? DraftKings Sportsbook, people. Official betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 on football and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Nobody's missing out on the action this season. All DraftKings customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. So get in on the NFL Week 2 action with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use code KCSN to sign up. New customers can bet just $5 and take home $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. That's code KCSN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in, I think, Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Mizzou Talk coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
All right, Mizzou. Mizzou beats Middle Tennessee 23 to 19. Mizzou Twitter was thrilled about it. Saw the reactions there. They feel very strong. It is funny. I mean, it's like Mizzou fans seem to be so tweaked by K-State Twitter throughout the offseason here, parading around after a 40-6 win last year. We officially recognize it as a 40-6 win in Manhattan last season. Very adamant that whatever, mid-12 and all this stuff. And then after the game, they fart out another I mean, just signature Eli Drinkwitz performance. He's really good at pushing these things out. And now all of a sudden they're just right back into their like, oh, we're going to lose by 100. So like, I don't know. Mizzou fans, they're going through it right now.
DY just wants to brag about his lock of the week on Middle Tennessee. I mean, he had that thing pegged.
Okay, well, here you go. I'm sorry. I'll shut up, DY. Your turn.
No, I've spiked the football. The last time I spiked the football, I went like 0 on Power
Hey,
Cat
John, DY went 0-6 in week 1 on Power Cat Game Day picks.
Oh, boy. Okay.
That was after spiking the football. Like I spiked the football. I was like, I won Power Cat Game Day. I won 3 mall. It was a great 2022. Next week, boom, 0-6. So I won't spike it too more. But the Missouri non-cover here was one of the easiest things to see because, and I will say this also tells me that it indeed is their Super Bowl, though. Like, this is, like, you're getting their best shot if you're Kansas State. And their performance against Middle Tennessee is probably, for me, even a bigger sign of that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, Super Bowl Saturday in Columbia this weekend, biggest game in Eli Drinkwitz's coaching career on the docket. So,
their media believes that, I think.
I think their fans probably believe that. I mean, some of them, although some seem pretty ticked off on social media with Drinkwitz at this point. I think they're catching on to the game here, but I don't know. You know, Missouri's 3-12 against teams with a 500 record or better the last 2 years in the Eli Drinkwitz era. His biggest wins, 8-5 South Carolina last year. That's their top-notch win at Mizzou. So, yeah, I watched.
Nobody loses to Georgia better than Eli Drinkwitz. So, you know, he can hang his hat on that. They can hang a banner for that one. Nobody loses to Georgia better than Eli Drinkwitz.
There's probably nothing. I mean, I guess beating someone like Georgia could. But in terms of what is realistic for Missouri, there's probably nothing more that can lengthen the leash for Eli Drinkwitz than a win over Kansas State this year. I would agree with that.
Yeah. No, it's a huge game for them. They're going to be fired up. I saw Bill Connolly projects it now. Actually, the line it's shifted a lot because of the way K-State looked and the way Mizzou looked. Bill Connolly has K-State now as a 10-point favorite. He projects a 30-20 win. While the betting line, I think there was an early look at it like K-State by 1. Now it's at what, like 3.5, 4?
Oh, I mean, I've seen it as high as 5 or 5.5. Like, and you're right. That look ahead line was 1.
The look ahead line was 1. It opened, I believe, at 3 or 3.5 on DraftKings, and then I think when I looked at DraftKings last night, it was 5.5.
Yeah. Well, it's still going to be a very tough game. I mean, I don't try to overreact to their performance in week 2, though. I'd watched that second half. Was watching the game.
Here's my question: how? Because I wanted to, but it was on like SEC Network Plus. I didn't even know how the hell to find it.
It was just ESPN3 on the Watch ESPN app. I was watching it on the computer. Had like 6 games going that night on Saturday night, and I was locked in on the Mizzou game. Brady Cook had an hilarious fumble in the end zone for a safety. They got sacked. He got sacked 4 times. Missouri, actually, because it only looks at FBS opponents only, and they only played 1. Missouri's 130th out of 133 FBS teams in sack rate right now. Brady Cook was sacked on 18% of his drop back attempts on Saturday. So, Drinkwitz is not happy with his offensive line. They have an all-SEC tackle at the left side and Jamon Foster. They have a good center in Connor Tollison. But the other 3 guys, it sounds like they may be considering making some changes up front, which that K-State defensive line looks pretty good, guys. So
I would say my early reaction to this game is this. I would expect it to be somewhat of a low-scoring affair. Like I said, their performance against Middle Tennessee pretty much confirmed to me that this is the game that they have circled on their calendar this year. So Kansas State's getting their best shot. Missouri's best shot offensively is not really redeeming at all, in my opinion. And Drinkwitz is, him being so conservative on 3rd and 4th downs is a sign of a lack of trust on that side of the ball, particularly at quarterback. That doesn't seem to have been fixed. But defensively, and this is what I'll say, when it comes to the SEC, even Missouri, the hallmark of those teams, where they are a little bit better than everybody else, is their defensive front, or in some cases, front 7. And Missouri is a good one. So they are emblematic of an SEC team in that way. So if they really have this game circled and they really give Kansas State their best shot, it's going to be maybe a little bit tougher for Kansas State to score than it was last year in what turned out to be a monsoon in Manhattan. So I could see, I think Kansas State's winning, spoiler alert, but I do see a much lower scoring event.
Brady Cook's putting up his numbers are weird. He's 31 of 40. He's completing 78% of his passes. And I just assume his air yards per attempt aren't great. I haven't found that number yet, but I assume it's a lot of shorter throws and guys just making plays. Their running game, look, Kamani Vidal for Troy, he was rated in week 1 by Pro Football Focus, the number 1 group of 5 running back in the country. And then he comes into Manhattan and, aside from that one big 46-yard run, I mean, that Troy team had 21 other rushes for 42 yards on actual run attempts. They finished the game. You take that away, they would actually have finished with 24 yards on 27 carries, but that includes sacks. So Missouri did run the ball well against Middle Tennessee. Like I said, I watched the game. Middle Tennessee would have gotten the ball back with a chance to win with 2 minutes left, if not for a just outrageous pass interference called on him on 3rd and 21, where Brady Cook just threw it up and the refs bailed him out with the call. So it was an uninspiring performance against a Middle Tennessee team picked to finish. I think they were 3rd in the preseason Conference USA out of 9. I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah, it was underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a dogfight. I think, to me, it was. I am not shocked by this result at all. The Middle Tennessee game. I've always felt like no matter, they could have lost that game. I think you were gonna get their best shot and a really focused Mizzou team. In fact, I was kind of glad in a way that they didn't lose, but they still got a hell of a wake up call there. They're gonna want this. I mean, for the players on the team, again, Mizzou fans can say all they want about Big 12, Mid 12, whatever, and SEC. The players on the team know that they just got their asses absolutely drilled last year, and so that's gonna be the motivating factor. Whatever conference this team is from. They're going to have revenge on their mind. It's going to be a home crowd. I assume that it will still be pretty juiced, even though Mizzou fans seem very perturbed by the Middle Tennessee game, understandably so. But it's going to be the first sellout that they've had in 4 years in Columbia. So this is the moment when we talk about how significant it is for Drinkwitz. The narrative that I was seeing from the Mizzou side before that game was hey, They sold out K-State, and I think a couple others. I think the LSU game sold out too. And it was because people were finally look, we've got momentum here. You just landed top 5 recruit overall in the country. We feel like this team is going to be better this year. This is the year they finally break through and get to 8 or 9 wins. And now you've already teetered losing all of that momentum by almost losing to Middle Tennessee at home. So I feel like the importance of this game is now ratcheted up even another notch for Drinkwitz here, because he's already floundering some of this momentum away 2 weeks into the season. So they know they need it. I don't know what that means, if that's going to be a Drinkwitz that all of a sudden grows a pair and decides to start going in on 4th down, going forward on 4th down, fake punts. I don't know, but I would expect Mizzou to really throw the kitchen sink here, I would imagine.
They're more desperate, but what I will also say, and it's cool that Kansas State's playing these games and they have Colorado on a schedule for eternity now, or not eternity, but until the next realignment phase at least. But this is what these regional games bring, because after the game, whoever loses, some fan base is going to be on fire.
And John, I know you wanted Missouri to win because you thought that would be better for K-State. I actually think if Missouri had lost, the fan base would be burning things down so much that it would have been a lackluster atmosphere on Saturday going into this game. So I wasn't really even rooting for Missouri at this. I was kind of laughing and enjoying the spectacle of what I was watching. Eli Drinkwitz was really defiant on his decision also to not go for a 4th and 1 at the near the 50-yard line late in the game, guys. In fact, he says in defense of that, they've got to go 83 yards because then the ball went on the 17, end quote, beginning quote. Their chances of scoring are a lot less than that at the 50, so it's the right play every time. Man, that's an inspiring quote. That's a great logic there.
But what I will say is that's the quote you get from every head coach, because 10 minutes after a game or they're not thrilled with, they hate being questioned by anyone about singular calls. I mean, I've seen stuff like that from every head coach, to be quite honest.
Okay, EY, how dare you defend Eli Drinkwitz?
I'm just saying coaches will blindly say that even if they don't believe it after the game, because if there's one thing a head coach hates the most, it's someone like me asking him, why on earth would you do this when I'm sitting up in the press box and air conditioning and they're down on the field and have been in coaching for 25 years.
Well, maybe he should win more games and he'll get questioned a little less. I mean, this seems like a pretty simple situation here. I also just, the other thing, whatever. We could talk for hours about him, but he's supposed to be an offensive guy. And I agree with you. I don't think that he really, there's no way that a head coach in 2023 could legitimately believe the words that came out of his mouth there. I think he's just covering for, we have a god-awful offense. Like, I don't have a good quarterback. I don't have a good offense. And I'm supposed to be this offensive guy. And I'm in year what? Is this like year 4? Year 3 or 4 for Drinkwick?
Year 4, if you count the COVID season, yeah.
And he still can't figure it out. So, like, he's got to cover somehow. And, of course, that's going to make him frustrated and mad because he's got a really good defense. He can't figure out the offense. He still hasn't been able to. So, I don't know. For a guy that runs his mouth as much as he does, I would expect him maybe to not be as sensitive, but he seems to be pretty sensitive. He also, everything I hear from Kansas City media, unwilling to go on and do appearances, like do anything with KC media. Like, they kind of hide him. Like, Mizzou does not make him very available. The whole operation seems very, like, it does not seem like a confident guy. It does not seem like a guy who's confident in what the whole thing is right now. So that is my hope that will rule the day on Saturday. But like we said, it's going to be a Super Bowl for Mizzou. They need it pretty badly. Any closing thoughts here before we wrap this one up, whether it's the Troy game, whether it's Mizzou, whatever?
No, I'm just excited for Saturday to get here, get in and get out of Columbia. John and I will be there. DY, make sure you keep an eye on us. Make sure we're safe down there.
I'm still waiting to have my credential application approved at this point, so I'm getting a little nervous, to be quite honest.
You're affiliated with all our trash talking, so they might just not. You might be sitting with us. Maybe we'll have an extra ticket for you. You can cover the game from the K-State section.
This is probably not the correct thing to say, but this feels like the start of the football season for Kansas State.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. And we've talked a lot about the road schedule. Like, it's going to be on paper. I think that's the caveat here. But on paper, it looks like a real, of a road schedule this year. And this is where it gets started. Like, we're gonna find some things out about this team. They got a little taste of adversity against Troy. I'm sure there will be more. It'll be a juiced crowd and a team that is certainly capable of beating them. They're going to face this situation a lot this year. So I agree. We'll start to find out some real answers on Saturday. Looking forward to it. Making my first trip to Columbia since 2004. So happy the game's here. Happy the game's scheduled. It should be a fun one. And, we'll talk about it a lot more coming up in a couple of days. So shout out to Holiday Distillery, Home Field, DraftKings. Appreciate everybody who helps support our show. So make sure that you go support them as well. For Nick Springer, behind the scenes. For Derek Young, for Cole Manbeck, I'm John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to 3 Mile once again. Take care, and we will talk to you soon.